The Village Market, located at 95 Main Street, Fairfield, is your small-town, fully stocked grocery store with that big store feel. Carrying quality vegetables, fruits, meats, deli items, and sure-fine products. They even have some inviting desserts. On your lunch break, stop by and grab one of the prepared, ready-to-go meals. Village Market's knowledgeable and courteous staff makes your visit an enjoyable experience. Visit them on Facebook and online at villagemarketfairfield.com. Open 7 days a week, the Village Market. We've got your groceries and more.
Again, Representative John Picciotti and Senator Scott Zerway.
Yep.
And another version of what's been happening in Augusta for the past couple of weeks. And we hope to at least enlighten you a little bit. And I know things were a little bit slow, but there are some things that are moving on, and there are some things that need to be factual and the truth be told. So we can start off with Senator Zerway.
Thank you. It's kind of cool this morning. This is Saturday morning. I got to remember the date here. It's February 13th, but and so you'll probably view this after the 13th. But I think it was 1 below this morning, and I think they're projecting very cold wind chill factors tomorrow. So I got my rabbits in so that they're not going to be cold.
Yeah, it's a good idea that everybody needs to take their pets in today and tomorrow because of the it's brutal out there.
Yeah. And so anyway, we have the Chocolate Festival going on today, too, in Fairfield. So that's pretty awesome. They do it every year, and it's a great time for everybody, and good Valentine's gifts out there. So
they do a very good job, and for all of those gentlemen out there that need to think about Valentine's Day, it's a good choice and good shopping.
Yeah. So we're going to start off kind of like, I think the biggest thing is the tax credit conformity bill. And I think that's what's really pushing right now. John, you kind of sat in the House when it got pretty exciting there. In the Senate, we had an overall vote for it. And then it got passed to the House, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, some more things happened. Yeah, so I'll let you kind of go over what happened there.
Unfortunately, what happened in the House was the bill came over from the Senate. And as you said, it went under the hammer, so to speak, means everybody voted for it.
Yeah.
And it is a same bill that was done in Washington. It was passed in Washington by the House and Senate and signed by President Obama.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very good bill. And what it does is it permanently gives us that tax conformity instead of having to redo it every year or 2 years, which kind of leaves an uneasiness because nobody really knows what's going to happen with it. Right. And the bill conformed perfectly. But unfortunately, the House Democrats put an amendment on there. And their amendment supposedly was to pick up an additional $23 million to put into education. All right, now basically what's happened is that according to the Department of Financial Services and the administration, it does not redirect anything. Basically what it does is it lowers some of the identified offsets and then raids the Budget Stabilization Fund for educational funding. Now, if you remember right back when we did our budget last year, and it was not a budget that was favored by the administration, so to speak, but we added $83 million to education.
We did. And in fact, I even talked to some people on their budget committees for the schools, and they didn't even know what to do with the money. And I said, why don't you buy down your tax rate? They say, hey, that's a good idea. So, sometimes, you get in these positions, and many of you know, in government type positions, they may get a budget and they may have spent what they needed, but then they say, if we don't spend this, then we won't get it next time. And that's the mindset that a lot of times it happens, and not intentionally, but they figure they're just trying to protect whatever they get, which is normal. But the thing is, we have to really look at the spending of people's money, and this is the bottom line. And we also look at, we did give $83 million for this last year and for this year, coming here for schools. And so if we're looking to help the schools, we have to look in many other directions as well. For example, like for business, this bill was designed not only for business but also for the schools. There were some really good points in this. There's a bonus depreciation, which allows small businesses to write off certain equipment costs as well as deduct the purchase price of certain equipment. For example, we'll just say if you had you're a farmer and you got a large tractor and you paid $50,000 for it and you want to depreciate it over time, and then you got up to, we'll say, $2,200 tax credit, that you could go out and replace that equipment that is depreciating and needing to be replaced. And $2,200, I don't know about you, but I'd like a nice $2,200 check in my pocket. But the Democrats' argument is said, hey, $2,200 isn't that much. How about putting it towards the schools? Well, we have put money towards the schools, but also there's a tax credit that's already built into this for education expenses deduction, which allows teachers to deduct up to $250 per year on any unreimbursed expenses related to their job. And then it's also earned income tax credit, which was going to expire in 2017 until Congress made it permanent, which is nice. And the tuition deduction gives much needed tax relief to low and middle income taxpayers for tuition and other expenses related to higher education. So it wasn't like there's no money for education, but what they're doing is kind of like taking all the money and putting it towards education instead of helping small business be able to continue their business. And also, if this helps small business, we get to keep people working here in Maine, and those workers tend to earn tax money, and that money can help pay for schools. So it's kind of a ripple effect. When you throw a rock in the pond, it has that ripple effect, and that's what this does. But if we go and just take that money and put it to education, we lose that. And so it was a great bill that was all set up. That's why the Senate went unanimous over it. That's Democrats and Republicans, and then went to the House, and it kind of went downhill from there. So.
Yeah, it was, unfortunately, it was one of those things where, we need to put this amendment in there because we're going to do another $23 million to education. And unfortunately, according to in the grand scheme of things, the EPS formula, the $23 million proposed to be put in education really won't do a thing. All right, basically what it'll do, the winners will win a lot more, and the losers will probably lose just a little bit less. So, they're distracted by screaming about property tax. The recent enacted budget fully funds both the BETR and the BETE, and has increased the homestead exemptions from $10,000 to $15,000 in property tax year 2016 and to $20,000 in year 2017. Now, you add that the additional GPA funding, municipal revenue sharing, and property tax fairness credit, you have a significant amount of state tax dollars being returned to the municipalities and schools every year. And I mean, I want, and I know you want, as much as we possibly can for education.
Sure.
Education is just tremendously. It's our future, and that. But we also have to be considered that small businesses in Maine are the ones that create the jobs for people to live in Maine and make a decent living, and that is the hardest thing. Now, the other problem is, as vice chair of the Fairfield Town Council, also. I don't want to see any increase in our property taxes. However, what we're really going to have to do is work hard together to achieve the best that we can. That's basically what it comes down to. In Fairfield, for example, one of the problems that we've had, and you look at it and say, well, gee, how come this and that? But if you remember right, all of the digging in the roads were tore up, and that we put in Summit Gas came in and put in a relatively large gas line in the Fairfield last year. That added $14 million to our valuation. And that doesn't include the amount of money that went into the TIF program either. That's a $14 million increase. And the way the EPS formula works is that when your value of your town property goes up, you lose.
Right. Yeah, that happened to Benton as well on the CMP substation, transformer substation that was built. They said, hey, this is going to give you $330,000 worth of tax, the tax money. And when the valuation went up $20 million, that brought the federal monies so that it dropped our taxes down, so we ended up with a wash. We didn't get any of tax money from that. And so they ended up having to put a TIF in to get just some money, which we got very little, to go towards parks and bike trails, walking trails, whatever, and different little things that they can take some of that money and use. So, but that doesn't take care of the main objectives of your roads and your schools and all the other parts that your taxes take care of. 3/4 of your property tax goes towards schools, and so when you're talking budgets, this was pretty critical. And so I understand all this as far as the natural gas situation goes, and it's gonna affect the town as far as not getting much tax.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you couple that additional $14 million valuation with the loss of students that we've had over the years and still continue to have, it's going to create a little bit of a snafu. So it's something we're going to have to handle.
Yeah, and that's something that doesn't get mentioned much, but the population of our students has gone down. I remember when I first started DARE, it was like 950 students at Benton Elementary School.
Yeah.
And now it's almost like under 600.
I was going to say, yeah, it's around 600.
So you're talking a third of the population of students is gone. So what we're looking at, they say that the 55% that they wanted for education, but the population has dropped down, so that's kind of why your increases aren't, it just doesn't match up, and we can't continue dumping all that money in for education because the population doesn't quite warrant it. It's not that, one thing I've always been is education, pro-education. I do not want to see our education take a hit, and it doesn't. I do think that we do have to be money wise, and it's important. I worked in the jails too. I was assistant jail administrator, and this last year we worked on the state and the county was kind of like, the state was trying to take the jails over, and
Right.
and then for a while, and during the time I was working at Kennebec County, and eventually they set up a board where the state was kind of involved and everything, and they would, and then but this last year we finally came to the conclusion that it should go back to the sheriffs being in charge of the jails, because let's face it, the sheriffs are being elected officials. They're going to try to make the budgets the best that they can. It's not as high a rate as state. The incentives of trying to make them shine to get reelected does make it better. So they put it back to the sheriffs. And so by doing that, I was talking to the sheriff from Oxford County, and he actually dropped their budget over $1 million.
Wow.
So that's a lot of money for a county.
A small, yeah, first.
So when you can drop a budget that much, that tells you that there are ways to cut. And so it's just, sometimes people don't want to see that and look at the big picture.
There is some going on. I know that one of the problems that is current is the fact that I think that the jails are told what they can charge for a prisoner, and it really doesn't cover expenses, even come close.
Yep.
And so there is talk of something going in that will allow the jails to charge what they need to charge to break their budget, even instead of losing money on a per day for prisoners, when some of the counties that don't have the facilities to house these prisoners have to rent them out. Unfortunately, the county that does the renting out, and Somerset's a good example of that, kind of gets hosed because they can't get enough money to cover that particular person on a per day basis.
And what was happening is, well, just for example, like Kennebec and I think in Oxford, and there was a few other counties that kind of got, they've as through the Sheriff's Association, they kind of got together and they said, how can we help each other? And so that was a really good effort. Yeah. And what they did is some of them took, like if they had a large population of females, they would ship the females over to another jail and then swap them for the males, which would make it cheaper because they were having problems in housing for the certain percentage of population. So because of corrections officers or whatever, is the factor. So sometimes working together and making things happen, you can actually cut costs.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I just look at this whole situation. Maine has, in the past, which has conformed to the federal government on Section 179, but has adopted its own version of bonus depreciation. And it's a bipartisan version, I might add, called the Maine Capital Investment Credit. All right, the partisan debate before the Maine legislature basically is centered on a proposal to make permanent and increase Section 179 expensing limitations and whether to extend the Maine Capital Investment Credit out to 2019. And various lawmakers have implied we should concentrate our efforts on small business, characterize the Maine Capital Investment Credit and as applying to only large corporations, when in fact, this credit applies to 4,000 Maine individual taxpayers, and these are all small, medium-sized businesses which pass through which this pass-through entitles, such as limited liability, corporations, S-corps, things like that. And according to the Maine Revenue Service, the majority of this credit goes to types of taxpayers, not out-of-state companies. And that's what, in truth, most are regular Maine taxpayers who own their own businesses. And that's what we're trying to concentrate on, and that's what we've got to do.
Yeah. I don't know how this is going to turn out on the tax conformity bill, because I think that there's a lot of things trying to figure this all out.
Yeah, I guess they're in negotiations right now.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know if it gets negotiated or people take a stance. We'll see what happens. it's kind of to me, we had it going, and then all of a sudden now
Yeah.
it's kind of wrenched.
Well,
into
I
it,
just
but-
don't like to be fooled by this typically bait and switch tactics that some people in the legislature use, and they're
Yeah.
trying to confuse the issue of conformity in school funding. And
Yeah.
that's where,
Well, I've done DARE for many years, and I know, my heart's into helping the kids, and I think everybody's is.
yeah.
But you have to look at how do we help the kids, and if your parents don't have a job, or your parents can't find work, then you're not helping your kids, and we really need those jobs. And if we take away tax credits from businesses, then those tax credits are going to affect businesses not staying here. They're going to say, hey, I'm going somewhere else. And so, because I can't take even advantage of depreciation on my equipment, I mean,
Well, not only that, but I'm selling you your equipment, and I can't even sell it to you because you're not going to buy it because you can't depreciate it.
Right.
So
I know.
I'm going to say, well, geez, then I guess I got to lay people off because I can't sell what I got.
I know. I know. So there is a line where
Yeah.
you gotta start using common sense, I guess. But
Anyway, seems to be the name of the game. It's common sense.
I try to use it. But
I had the luxury last week of touring a place that we have here in our area that I didn't even realize we had. The name of it is called Day One.
yeah, so
and-
wonderful.
It was.
Program.
I was so amazed. What it is it's a rehabilitation house for teenagers that have been arrested on drugs,
Yep.
and basically instead of sending them to juvenile detention or whatever,
It's another choice.
this is another choice, and they go there for 6 or 8 months. And I'll tell you what, went through. I had a tour. I was taken on a tour by 2 of the senior gentlemen that were in there, and it was spectacular.
Yeah.
They showed they've got schedules that each one of them has a specific job they have to do. It changes from week to week. One day Joe might cook and Sam has to wash the dishes, and Mel has to wash the clothes, and thing like that. But it's
Learn
kind of
basic needs.
it really reminded me of a military boot camp.
Well, you have
And,
to have discipline, and the kids,
And they were just
Yep.
they were just so excited, and you could tell that they were all very relaxed, and it was teaching them how to be.
Sure.
And that was a big thing.
I did a Thumbs Up program for 13 years. It was a juvenile diversion program, and it was a weekend program, and it was kids that had their first offense, and they had a chance to choose either to go to court or go to this program. And we also included the parents on the last 4 hours of it, so that there was a parent piece.
Yeah.
But it really paid off. Probation Parole was ecstatic about it because it really eliminated a lot of them getting into the probation system. And so when we did our surveys, almost 95% of the kids would say that they wanted discipline. They lacked discipline in their families. And that's what they said the biggest factor was. And so, like you say, it's very regimented. It has, things that they're assigned to
Well,
do.
and they also do homeschooling.
Homeschooling, yeah.
The hard part is that there is very little. In fact, the real shortage was now the facility I went through was all boys.
Yeah.
And they have one other facility like that. And then they have a third facility for girls, but it's like for 4 girls. They have almost no facility for girls.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about all this education money and stuff. These people, because of the insurmountable problems we have in the state with drugs, particularly as it's going down into the teenage level, we need these places.
We do.
Big time.
We do. And while we're talking about education, I do have a bill in LD 1540. And it's an act to protect all students in elementary or secondary schools from sexual assaults by school officials. Of course, all this bill is all about protecting all our school-aged children. So the bill removes the age limit on the victim of the crime when the student is at an elementary, secondary, or special education school, and the actor is a person at school that has the authority over a student or has instructional and authority positions. And in fact, the fact of the matter is that many high school students are 18 years of age or older, and the power dynamic still applies to them because sometimes, you have situations where, the principal or the teacher or whoever's has authority over them knows the dynamics of their families or what's going on, and they take advantage of those situations. So this is no different than, we'll say, a probation officer over a probationer or a corrections officer over an inmate. There's no age factors there. So this is no different. And so I got a unanimous vote in criminal justice on
Excellent.
this.
Excellent.
So I think that it probably will go through. And
Well, I think
I'm hoping the governor will go along with it.
Yeah, I
And,
think it's on our schedule.
It is?
I believe I
Yep.
glanced over the legislative, advance that we get for next week.
So it'll go to him and then to the House, and then it'll come back to the Senate, and then go to the House and back to the Senate, and then it goes to the governor. That's
Right.
how it goes. So there's a lot to get a bill in.
Absolutely.
To make it law. So anyway, we also have LD 1541 as another one that I put in, an act to increase sentences imposed for illegal importation of scheduled drugs. And this is a very important one. I think that we can really make a difference here. This bill, if you look into this, I don't know if you ever looked at the criminal code, but it's Title 17A of subsection 1118. It has the importation of illegal drugs in that section, and all it says is the definition of what importation means, illegal importation, and then it has Title C, Class C crime, which is up to 5 years imprisonment, and then a Class D crime, and that was the first one. The Class C crime was for Scheduled W drugs, which is like heroin, cocaine,
Yes.
crack, there's fentanyl. And then you get XYZ drugs, which are the more like ecstasy or some pills, prescription pills, some opiates, codeine, those type things, where they fall into that. But those would only be Class D crime, which means less than a year in jail. And so I said, hey, we've got to bring that up. So we went from a Class D to a Class C crime for the XYZs, and then a Class C crime to a B crime, which goes from 5 years to 10 years for heroin. And then if you get picked up for, and these are for the mules, these are the guys that are bringing it across state line into our state. And if they've got large amounts, it goes up another class. So it goes from a XYZ classes from, at that point, C to a B, which is up to 10 years. Actually, a B, you can go up to 10 years, and then an A, which would be the W scheduled drugs like heroin. If you got large amounts, and it goes to a Class A as a aggravated piece. And now aggravated can be it could go up to 30 years imprisonment.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think this is making a big statement. And
Yes.
the aggravated piece includes, like, if you have a juvenile with you or minor, and then, or if you have a extended criminal history, or if you have guns, firearms, all these things will add on to causing this to become an aggravated piece. So, and in large amounts. So I think it's a good bill. It's sending a clear message. It's putting that sign up and saying, "Don't come to Maine." And if you come to Maine, you're probably not going to go home. That's what I like about
you know,
it.
and that's a that makes sense. One of the things that I was amazed at, I found out. I guess we should have been aware of it. All right, from a national level, it doesn't really affect us here in Maine. It does from a standpoint. All right, we spend and probably send millions, billions of dollars to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
90% of all of our heroin comes out of Afghanistan. That is in this country. Now, it may come across the Mexican border or whatever, but 90% of the heroin comes from Afghanistan, yet we're feeding those people. And I've talked to, I actually even talked to some people that were stationed over there, because I had a little visit to Camp Keys last week. And they were telling me, well, we were given specific orders when we were over there, do not touch the poppy fields, because that's their source of income.
Yeah.
You know, and it's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
It just doesn't make sense.
And the good thing about this bill is that you can have DEA labs test this heroin or whatever, and they can tell exactly where it came from.
Yeah.
And they can monitor these things by they can tell by the cameras when they come through the state lines. They can tell by cell phones. They can get warrants and check the cell phones. They can do monitor from Intel, computers. There's all kinds of things that they can do to make this law proven. So what bothers me is when you go in, I went and explained my bill, and then you have, some of the other side saying, hey, how about, what if you used just a usable amount? Are you going to put them in jail, or a recreational usable amount? And I said, how do you put recreational usable amount in heroin? I mean, when it kills somebody on their first use, I don't get that. And so we're going to have some people arguing it on the floor. I mean, we had 8 out of the 13 that did vote for this bill, so it will go to
Come into the House and Senate.
And hopefully we'll even get you to talk on it.
Yes.
And that will be a good thing.
We can do that.
And so, and then I will speak on it in the Senate floor, how important this bill is. I think this is probably one of the most important bills this session, because we've got to stop this heroin coming in. You see it every day in the news, almost every day.
Well, I was told too that with heroin particularly, is that there's, with the snorting of it, that if you give somebody a proper amount and they snort it, they become addicted immediately.
Oh yeah, it's just like cocaine too as well.
Yeah.
And some of them, they get hooked on cocaine, and then, I talked to one guy. He said that he was so hooked that he was starting to turn pale white, like this sheet, and then he got greasy hair, and his hands were jittery, and he was sniffing all the time, going like that. And then and he said that he'd get sores in his nose, and then he'd tell his drug dealer, he says, everybody's starting to move away from me. They're getting to know that I'm taking cocaine. So then he said that the drug dealer said, try heroin, it'll bring you down. So he did that, and then he ended up using both cocaine and heroin, which they call speedballing. So they put both together, and that's how John Belushi died. And there's several actors that have died that way, speedballing. And his high became just a rush. His eyes would turn in the back of his head, and he'd fall to the floor, and he'd be going in convulsions, and that was his rush. And it's a sad way to live. And not to mention that he would duct tape his windows and all his curtains and everything in his doors so that nobody would see inside. And one time he said a mailman came to his door, knocked on the door, and left because he didn't go to it. But he grabbed all his needles, and he grabbed all these blankets and everything and put them in front of him in the bathroom closet, and he stayed there all day. Just didn't dare to go out because he thought it was police out there. So you're trapped in your own world.
Yeah.
That's what happens. You become in your own prison.
That's so sad.
It is
so
sad,
sad.
So when we're talking serious drugs, we really are, and it becomes a really dangerous way of life.
Yeah.
And not to mention, this guy even sold. He volunteered to take care of this guy's mobile home while they were gone on vacation. They came back and their mobile home was gone. He sold it.
Sold it to someone. That's a good way to raise money.
Right.
Hey. Jeez.
Oh, so, and then there is another bill that I think is very important. Is LD 1536.
Yes.
An act to provide ballistic vests to state law enforcement officers. Now, this bill is sponsored by Senator David Burns, who's a retired state trooper
Yep.
in Washington County, and he worked for 25 years and retired. And the safety of law enforcement officers is the utmost importance. And as you noticed, there was 9
I was going to say
officers just killed this last week.
This last week was a tough week in the country.
And so this is getting, really serious, and we have to take care of our officers. And I know in my department, it was mandated that you had to wear a bulletproof vest if you was a full-time law enforcement officer. And they don't have that mandate in the state.
I mean, it makes perfect sense because we're sitting at, and particularly again with what we're starting to involve into the drugging aspect, it is going to come to a point where there is going to be some of those problems here.
So every day, these brave men and women put themselves in harm's way in order to ensure the safety of the Maine's people. And this bill requires that all active law enforcement officers employed by the state be equipped with well-fitting, contemporary ballistic vests. And that's very important. And the bill also requires such vests to be provided for law enforcement dogs, the canines, by the state.
Right.
And the risk of dying from a gunshot wound to the torso is 3.4 times higher for law enforcement officers who do not wear armored vests. So it's very important to have.
It makes perfect sense.
So I tip my hat off to Senator David Burns. He's a good friend, and I really he's the chairman in the judiciary and committee, and he does a very good job. And there's also Senator Paul Davis, who he's done some really great things as well. He's a retired state trooper, and he's a really nice man.
They were House members in 2010 when I was there with them, so they did a great job too.
Yeah.
And then there was one more bill that we'll discuss briefly that's in your committee. And it's a very simple bill. Basically, all it does is allows, right now, if you want to go over the internet, you can bet on horse races anywhere in this country through, I guess, wagering, some type of
off-track betting.
Yeah, off-track betting.
Yeah.
Anyway, you go on the internet and you can go to any place, hit it, and bet. Unfortunately, except for Maine. Out of Maine, you can do this into other states.
There's 33 states right now currently doing it.
And with Maine, you can't, the off-track betting, the parlors and the casinos cannot do it in Maine because it's against the law. So we're losing all of the people from Maine that go online and make bets and things like that across country and whatever. We're losing every penny of that tax dollar.
Yeah, and some of that tax money could go helping towards business, and which I'd like to, see a part of that go back towards the off-track and harness racing, the agriculture for the fairgrounds. We want to try to help the kind of the business that it's in to help sustain what's happening. So I think that it would help them. The harness racing is really taking some hits, and because times change, the internet, people don't go out like they used to, and so I think that this would be a big help.
And
to
it's
them.
not it's not something that we're saying, okay, let's get a whole bunch of more people head on for gambling and stuff like that. It's already being done. All we want to do is take advantage of what's already being done and keep the tax money in our state, because it is in harness racing. It's tough out there. The people that are raising horses and things like that are having a very difficult time. So it's something that we really need to concentrate on.
I mean, you know, if you think of harness racing, it's not just the racing. There's a lot to harness racing. You have farms that raise the horses. There's haying, there's grain, there's all the saddlery, all the land and the property and the people that run the equipment and buy and sell equipment. It's a big industry. It's not just you're looking at horses racing down the track. And I look at the big picture, and when I make these decisions, it's not just because, and believe me, I haven't even stepped foot in a casino, and I haven't been on a horse track for many years. I have stopped and got in a couple times.
Yeah, twice I've been to. I went and ate lunch in Bangor once, and then we were out joyriding one Sunday afternoon and stopped at Oxford just to walk through the casino and see what it was like. So those are my two visits to the
But I grew up on a farm, and I know that it takes a lot to get to those situations. I used to show cattle, and but there's a lot to the farming industry, and then the showing was just a sideline, a little fun thing to do. But it kind of like gets your name out there a little bit for the farm and whatever, and it was a fun experience to mingle with the other farmers, and it just gave you a little pride, a sense of pride, and whatever. So I think that it really is a piece of the industry, and people do take pride in their racehorses and whatever, and so. I think it's warranted.
I guess.
And we are trying to figure that out. We're trying to come up with a cascade of where that tax dollars would go and try to make it feasible for the state to operate, and also to make the monies be able to go in the right direction.
So I guess that's pretty much it for the last couple of weeks, and our sessions are going to start getting tougher. I noticed that starting around the 1st of March, we're going to be there 1 or 2 more days a week than we are right now for session-wise, which means we'll be studying a lot of bills. I mean, it was 147, I believe, carried over, plus another. So we're in a 300-plus bill market right now. So we've got a little bit of work left to do in March.
I was fortunate to get 2 bills approved to go in, because
as
I figure with that amount, and there's quite a few representatives, senators that didn't even get a chance to put a bill in.
I've got 2 that are floating too.
So we're very fortunate. So anyway, thank you, and I hope that this helped you get a little more insight of what's going on in Augusta, and we're excited, and I'm going to be running again for state senate, and John, you're going to run again for...
As I am running again for state representative.
And we'll try to keep doing a good job for you.
And please feel free to contact either one of us if you've got any questions, concerns, or whatever. The more we hear from you, the more that we can represent you better.
That's right. Thank you.